Today I'm going to show you how to paint the Marvel Crisis Protocol range rulers. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the very colorful, gradient-looking range rulers out on the internet. Even the promo pictures for them show them colored like this. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing them. One, using an airbrush, and one for those of you who don't have an airbrush or want to try something different. So I started off by priming it black. Then I'm grabbing some of this foam. You can grab foam from a blister pack or pretty much anywhere. And I'm taking little bits out just to make a more uneven, non-uniform texture. We're going to start off darker and lighten the whole thing. I'm starting off with some P3 Iron Hull Gray. So you just want to grab your sponge, dip it in the paint, and then dab most of it off on a surface of some sort, either a paper towel or, in this case, my little impromptu palette. And then you start sponging it. This color I'm using to make the rock-like texture on the outside of the range ruler. So I'm just sponging as I go, tapping everywhere, making sure not to slide it. You definitely want to make sure that you're going vertical and not horizontal at all for this. Once the outside is done, I'm doing the inside as well, trying to leave a little bit of a gap between the edges. This is just to make that gradient look, going from dark to lighter. Now that we got the base down, we're going to go one shade lighter. We're going to use some Vallejo Light Gray. You've got to be a little bit more delicate at this point because you just want to get the inside of the recessed area, trying not to touch the raised edges. I'm actually using a different piece of sponge at this point where I'm using just the corner of it to try to get the center of the range ruler. Finally, we're going to go even lighter this time using just some pure matte white. Again, you want to use the edge of the sponge at this point just to get the very center of the line. Once you're done with sponging the white, you want to let this sit for a little while. You really want to make sure that it dries before the next step. Now we're going to start tinting the inside. I'm using Casandora Yellow from Citadel. It does look orange, but trust me, once it goes on, it's very yellow. It's what the Games Workshop Studios uses for their Savage Oryx yellow armor. So just grabbing a paintbrush and grabbing some of the shade and just going all over the center recess of the range ruler. Just like in the previous steps, you'll want to make sure that this dries completely before moving on to the next step. Now to give it that green evil look, I'm using Citadel's BL Tan Green. What we're going to do here is we're just going to put it on the edge right where the crevice and the higher raised areas touch, leaving some of the yellow in the center. Now with the darker green on the edges, I decided to water down some of the BL Tan and just lightly glaze the center yellow. It's just barely going to change the color at this point because of the water content diluting the pigments, but it does add, it ties everything together. Now looking back on it, it looks like I was a little bit overzealous with the sponge and might have caught some of the raised edges. So I'm using some black paint here, just some Vallejo black primer in this case, and I'm watering it down. And what I'll do is just go over the areas that were lightened by the sponge or got a bit of the wash on it. The important thing here is to water it down. We don't want to paint the edges black. We just want to bring it back to the same look as the rest of the edges. Finally, I'm just going to clean up the sides of the range ruler. Call it a little bit of OCD here. Just want it to look completely nice and not have any spillover from the sponge or any of the washes. A pretty cool effect for just using a few shade paints. You can also use contrast paints if you prefer. Now, if you prefer using an airbrush or spray cans, you can create an entirely different look. Again, on a primed range ruler, I start off with some Vallejo Italian Red. I'm going to water this down, well, dilute it with some flow improver, just to make sure that it doesn't stick in the airbrush causing spatter or anything, and that it flows properly. So we're just coating the entire thing with a light spray of the red. We want to get an even coat here. Next up, I load the airbrush with a bit of Game Color Hot Orange from Vallejo. We're just going to airbrush the inner crevice, what makes it look like the lava pool. This will start the gradient to a lighter shade. Now we're going to add some yellow. In this case, it's the Vallejo Scrofulous Brown. It's a nice yellow that coats very well, but you got to make sure that you thin it down in the airbrush or it'll clog up. A little bit of water, a little bit of flow improver, mix it all up, and you should be good to go. Looking it over, I got a little bit of overspray with the Scrofulous Brown, so I'm putting some more of the Italian Red just on the raised areas. That way its overspray will cause that gradient I want. Then I'm going to use some black paint to cover the top of the raised areas, just using a paintbrush and brushing it on. Well, you can achieve these really cool effects
using a variety of methods. You don't always need an airbrush to get these cool results. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you could use some of the contrast paints from Citadel instead of the washes, or make your own washes using your acrylic paints and a acrylic medium such as Citadel's Lamia medium. Well, if you thought this was useful, make sure to click the like button, and if you haven't already, click the subscribe. We try to release new content multiple times a week, so if you want to stay notified of all this, click that little bell icon. Also, we've launched a Patreon account. The link is in the description. Every dollar that you want to contribute goes a long way in helping us provide this content for you. Well, as always, enjoy, and we'll see you next time.